welcome back to Procurement Takeaways, videos which are dedicated to all things procurement law. My name is Claire Gamage. I'm an associate here in the procurement team at Bird & Bird. I have specialised in public procurement law now for 5 years, predominantly advising on complex procurements in the IT and infrastructure sectors, acting for challenges in procurement challenges, but also defending challenges as well, and also providing day-to-day ad hoc advice to both the public and private sector in respect of navigating the procurement rules themselves. I'm joined here again today by my colleague Chris Murray, a senior associate in our public procurement team and expert in public procurement law also. Chris is named as a leading practitioner in the field of government contracts in Who's Who Legal, as named as an associate to watch in the Legal 500, and is an active member of the Procurement Lawyers Association. So without further ado, in today's video we're going to talk about the latest Ferrygate scandal, in which the government awarded quite significant contracts to ferry operators without undertaking a competition. We believe this is quite an important topic and perhaps very relevant in today's climate, where we're looking at possibly a no-deal Brexit, and it might be interesting to see how contracting authorities deal with contracts in preparing for that eventuality. So, Chris, could you just explain a little bit more about the background in this case?
Yep, absolutely. So this all kicked off with the publication of what are known as contract award notices in the Official Journal on the 28th of December last year. The contracts, there was 3 of them, were for additional freight capacity on ferry services between the UK and continental Europe. And were to minimise disruption in trade in the event of, as you say, a no-deal Brexit. Mm-hmm. The 3 contracts, including one to the now infamous Seaborne Freight, were valued in total at around about £110 million, so relatively significant, as you've said. Those notices explained that a formal procurement procedure hadn't been undertaken on the grounds that the contracts were being awarded because of extreme urgency. Now, as legal practitioners would refer to that as being a Regulation 32 exemption, where there's some form of urgency brought about by unforeseeable events. What followed after publication of those notices then seemed like a constant barrage of press coverage, particularly relating to Seaborne, as it turned out that Seaborne had no ferries, it had no contracts with the port that it was meant to operate into, and it was also operating apparently on the basis of terms and conditions which were applicable to pizza delivery rather than the provision of ferry services.
So Seaborne had no experience at all, I believe, in undertaking a contract of this nature.
That's right, and that's something that came out in the subsequent litigation that we'll talk about. Now, that Seaborne contract was actually ultimately cancelled by the government, I think, because of those issues that had been addressed in the press. In the background of all that, Eurotunnel, who we all know, challenged the decision, and that was on the 25th of January of this year, claiming that the Department of Transport had breached public procurement law. There are various points in their claim, but essentially what they were saying was that the events were not unforeseeable, as the Department of Transport had tried to make out, because on the 29th of March of 2017, Parliament voted to trigger Article 50 of the European Treaty, meaning that we were bound to leave the European Union on the 29th of March of this year without a deal, unless a deal could be agreed. So the key point was that the grounds were not, or the events, sorry, were not unforeseeable. In the alternative, the Eurotunnel also claimed that the Department of Transport had failed to adequately prepare for the events of a no-deal Brexit. And then, again, alternatively, they argued that the contracts that were awarded were not actually strictly necessary. Number one, because the contracts could have been much shorter, or for a lower value, but also secondly, and probably more importantly, that a regulated procurement process could have been conducted in the time it had taken before those contracts were awarded. That latter point is interesting because it transpired through the litigation, through a process of voluntary disclosure, that the Department of Transport had sent out an informal invitation to tender to a number of companies in November of 2018. Bearing in mind these contracts were awarded towards the end of December 2018. And they said that the companies that they had identified consisted of 100% of maritime freight service providers at the time, as well as Seaborne, who were not an incumbent provider of those services, but who had apparently demonstrated to the Department of Transport that they were a start-up in this area and they were capable of delivering those services. Now just to finish this point off, the Eurotunnel claim, Eurotunnel sought what's known as a declaration of ineffectiveness, meaning that if they were to win in the litigation, each of those contracts would essentially be void going forward, leaving the government without that provision which they made out, or which they were of the view was urgently required. The trial was due to start last Friday, which was the 1st of March, and lo and behold, on the day of the trial, the government announced that they had settled the claim for a grand total of £33 million.
I think one of the interesting points which you started to raise there, Chris, was if an informal procurement process started in November and the contracts were awarded in end of December 2018, that would appear to be plenty of time to run an open or restricted, or even a condensed version of an open or restricted procedure into the urgency grounds. And what happened in this case was, I believe, the Regulation 32 exemption was used when the grounds were not really permitted. Would you agree with that? I think it's
difficult for me to give a firm view on that because we obviously don't have all of the information available to us. But I am sceptical, at least, let's say, that the grounds were made out for Regulation 32. I have some sympathy for the arguments that were put forward by Eurotunnel in terms of the foreseeability of those events, and also the point that you've just made around the fact that they could have run a procurement process in the time that they had available to them. So certainly, I think it's questionable.
Yeah, and so for all of you out there who legal eagles, Regulation 32 is itself a procedure, albeit in reality it is an exemption from an obligation to run a public procurement procedure. One of the grounds, urgency, which the Department for Transport relied on here, the threshold has typically be very high, I would think would be fair to say, in that it's not something which can be easily relied on, and there needs to be genuine urgency.
So in summary, I think the key takeaways are that despite the fact that as we speak to you right now, we're only 2.5 weeks away from Brexit, there remains a great deal of political uncertainty as to what will happen, including the possibility that we exit on a no-deal basis. And that could mean that there are other contracting authorities who are out there and who may be inclined to rely on the urgency argument that the Department of Transport relied on in this case. With that being the case, I think if I were a bidder or a potential bidder interested in contracts, I'd be monitoring the Official Journal of the European Union to see if there are other contracts out there that are being awarded without a formal procurement process.
So the second key takeaway is that if you are a contracting authority and you are considering using the Regulation 32 urgency exemption, just bear in mind that there is a very high threshold in terms of how the courts interpret the use of that exemption, and therefore it is probably best to seek specialist legal advice before using that exemption, just to make sure you don't find yourselves in the same position as the Department of Transport did here.
So as Claire said at the top of the video, if you are interested in hearing more from us on developments in procurement law, then please keep an eye out on our social media. And thanks again for listening.